en 7 claves para hacer que las prácticas basadas en evidencia se peguen, lecciones desde el campo, usted muestra datos que indican que la capacitación de personas no es suficiente para mantener el nuevo enfoque aprendido. Y afirma lo siguiente: la literatura sugiere que, además de la formación inicial, las organizaciones necesitan un conjunto complementario de estrategias organizativas para reforzar la innovación y asegurar que sea valorada en todos los aspectos de la organización. ¿Cuáles son esas estrategias que permiten a las organizaciones implementar un enfoque de supervisión RNR?
Well, again, I thank you for the question. And I'm also tickled pink that you read this particular article. I happen to like this article a lot. So as I said, just recently said, you know, we think training is the end all. It's the thing we have to do. But training actually is very ineffective. We have basically learned that in training sessions, people usually take away one idea and then they don't know what to do with it in practice. So they don't really understand how they can bring that into their current work. So training increases awareness, but it doesn't really deal with the importation into routine work. That actually requires what's referred to as strategic or procedural training that basically focuses more on helping people learn to use this in their current world. So what can you do about this? Well, first of all, recognize that the one and done training is not going to be very effective. And second of all, think of this more as an organizational development strategy. So the first thing you need to do in the organizational development strategy is train the gatekeepers to understand the reforms. So the gatekeepers are usually that middle level staff that keeps life in status quo, that doesn't really want to do things differently because it's more work for them. But you have to engage those gatekeepers so that they understand this is actually for the betterment of themselves and for the organization overall. That's one. Number two is we really have to develop champions and opinion leaders in organizations. So organizations are like gossipy people, right? They gossip, they share things amongst themselves. But really what organizations are basically they listen to the leaders of those organizations, and the leaders are not necessarily the administrators. They're usually informal leaders, people that have a lot of respect, people that have garnished certain credits for their work that they've done, people that are well-liked generally in the organization. And so we really have to work with those to develop those champions so they can echo the message about why the reform is needed and what will happen in this particular reform. So once you've developed your gatekeepers, once you've developed your champions, then you really have to think about that skill building of staff. So one of the reasons a lot of reforms don't get done is because staff don't feel they have the confidence, the skills to do what we're asking of them. And so instead of raising their flag and moving forward, they're basically stuck in the, I'm going to do it my way. So we have to coach the staff to develop new skills and to develop confidence in the decisions that they make. Let me give you an example. I once was in a probation office and I was talking to, I observed a session where there was a probation officer who was dealing with a probationer, and the officer got really frustrated because the probationer wasn't listening. And so what did the officer do? I don't know the word for it in Spanish, but in English, the officer threw spitballs at the individual. right? They wadded up little balls, put it in their mouth, and spit it out at the person, right? Why did that officer do that? Because they didn't know how to deal with the ambivalence that the probationer was basically working through. They didn't see it as the fact that the person was nervous about change, that the person wasn't quite sure what the officer wanted them to do. And so they basically used a rather childlike mechanism of being able to communicate with the individual. That basically suggests that that officer needs skills. They need to learn how to deal with typical situations. And what we know about change processes is that ambivalence is a big issue. So we have to devote our attention to coaching staff. And I would highly recommend that we train our supervisors and we train some of the opinion leaders to be the coaches so that you have inside the organization people who can do this hard work and they're helping to move the organization along to better goals. All of this can contribute to basically a cultural shift in the organization, which is basically designed to look at what are the new goals and missions, what kind of models are being articulated, and the cultural shift should involve management using the skills that R&R gives us for dealing with staff also. The other two areas that are important strategies are resources. Most of our justice agencies are low resourced and we need more resources. And then another particular area is stakeholder development. So you don't want your judges or your prosecutors undermining what the corrections department is doing. You want them to support that and to support these innovations. So you really have to work on that stakeholder development. And that the book that Steve Belinko and I wrote about implementation is really focused a lot on developing stakeholders. And then, as I've indicated, you know, we need to focus on legitimacy, that issue that has to do with recommending that, you know, what we're planning to do is consistent with the goals and missions of the organization. And we need to focus on procedural justice and fairness so that, you know, the folks who are making decisions are aware that they're making decisions that are fair to all individuals.